My name is Lyle Thompson, and at 68 years old, I never thought my own son would try to steal my home. Thomas, the successful doctor I raised with love, stood in my living room with his lawyer wife, Amanda. Their words still echo in my mind. "Sign over the house, Dad, or we will have you declared incompetent." I just smiled, appearing fragile and confused, exactly as they expected. Little did they know, I had already set my plan in motion. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button. I spent my entire career as an architect, designing homes for other people while dreaming of creating my own masterpiece. 30 years ago, I finally did it. I purchased a beautiful waterfront lot just outside of Seattle and poured my heart and soul into designing our family home. Every angle, every window placement, every detail was carefully considered. I wanted to create something that would not only shelter my family but inspire us. The property cost $180,000 back then, which was a stretch for us. The construction came in at just under $400,000. Evelyn, my wife, was nervous about taking on such a large mortgage, but I promised her it would be worth it. I was right. Today, the property is valued at $2.8 million, a fact that became central to my story. Our home sits on 2 acres of waterfront property with unobstructed views of the Sound. The main structure features floor-to-ceiling windows that face the water, bringing nature inside. I designed an open-concept living area with vaulted ceilings, exposed beams, and a central stone fireplace that became the heart of our home. The kitchen opens to both the dining area and a covered deck that wraps around 3 sides of the house. The master suite occupies the entire east wing, with its own private deck and outdoor shower. I included 3 additional bedrooms, my home office, and a basement workshop where I continued to build furniture and small architectural models after retirement. Evelyn and I raised Thomas in this house. We watched sunsets from the deck, planted gardens, hosted countless dinner parties, and built a life filled with love. For 40 years, Evelyn was my partner in everything. She supported my career, managed our home, and filled our lives with warmth and laughter. She was the one who insisted we turn the smallest bedroom into a library, which now houses over 2,000 books, each one carrying memories of discussions we had about them. 3 years ago, I lost Evelyn to ovarian cancer. It happened quickly, 6 months from diagnosis to the day I held her hand as she took her last breath. The house felt empty without her, but it was also filled with her presence. Her garden still blooms every spring. The kitchen still smells like her famous apple pie when I bake using her recipe. Her clothes still hang in our closet because I cannot bear to remove them. This house is more than walls and a roof. It is the physical manifestation of our love story. Despite living in such a valuable property, I live modestly. I drive a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with 120,000 miles on it. I shop carefully, using coupons and buying in bulk. My splurges are limited to good coffee, fresh seafood, and books. My retirement income is comfortable but not extravagant. I volunteer 3 days a week at a community center teaching architecture and design to disadvantaged youth. On weekends, I often go fishing with my neighbor Jack, who has lived next door with his wife Martha for 25 years. Jack and Martha watched our family grow, shared holidays with us, and were at the hospital when Evelyn died. They check on me regularly, bringing homemade meals and making sure I am not alone too much. We share a glass of whiskey on my deck most Friday evenings, reminiscing and watching the boats on the water. They know me better than almost anyone and have become family in every way that matters. Looking back, I can see signs of Thomas's materialistic nature that I chose to ignore. As a child, he was always focused on what his friends had, that he did not. He compared the size of our home to his classmates' houses, even though ours was architecturally unique and in a better location. He chose his college based on prestige rather than program quality. He selected his medical specialty, cardiology, because it was lucrative, not because he was passionate about it. After Evelyn died, Thomas began asking more questions about the house. What was it worth now? How much were the property taxes? Was the insurance adequate? At first, I thought he was concerned about my financial stability, but now I see he was assessing his future inheritance. I had always planned to leave the house to him eventually. It was our family home, and I wanted it to stay in the family. But I also planned to live out my days here, surrounded by memories of Evelyn and the life we built together. I never imagined my own son would try to force me out of my home 3 years after his mother died. I never thought he would see me as an obstacle to his financial gain rather than as his father. I never believed he would conspire with his wife to declare me incompetent simply to get their hands on a valuable piece of real estate. But that is exactly what happened, and this is the story of how I fought back. Thomas always wanted the best of everything. He worked hard, I will give him that. He graduated at the top of his class in high school, earned a full scholarship to Stanford, and was accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School. He completed his cardiology fellowship at Mayo Clinic and now runs a successful practice in the city, specializing in interventional cardiology. His career trajectory has been impressive, and as his father, I felt immense pride in his achievements. 15 years ago, Thomas married Amanda, a corporate lawyer specializing in estate law at Williams & Preston, one of the largest firms in Seattle. They met at a charity gala, and Thomas was immediately taken with her intelligence, ambition, and connections. Amanda comes from a wealthy family with political ties, and her influence helped Thomas establish his practice in an exclusive medical building downtown. Together, they present the perfect image of success. They live in a 5,000-square-foot home in an exclusive gated community. They drive matching luxury cars, a Mercedes for him and a BMW for her. Their children, my grandchildren, Jackson, 14, and Sophia, 12, attend Lakeside Academy, where annual tuition exceeds $40,000 per child. They belong to Pine Ridge Country Club, take exotic vacations twice yearly, and host elaborate dinner parties for their network of equally successful friends. What I did not know until recently was that their picture-perfect lifestyle is built on a foundation of debt. They are overextended on their mortgage, carrying balances on multiple credit cards, and struggling to maintain appearances. Thomas's medical practice is successful, but not as lucrative as they pretend. Amanda made partner at her firm, but at the cost of working 70-hour weeks, leaving little time for family. Their lavish spending is their way of convincing themselves and others that they have achieved the American dream. My grandchildren are being raised with the same materialistic values. Jackson and Sophia compare themselves to their peers based on clothing brands, electronics, and vacation destinations. They rarely visit me without commenting on how my house is old-fashioned or in need of updates. They ask why I do not have the latest smart home technology or why my television is so small. Amanda encourages this behavior, subtly reinforcing the idea that newer and more expensive is always better. After Evelyn died, Thomas's behavior toward me began to change. His visits, which had been infrequent before, became more regular. At first, I was touched by his apparent concern. He would call to check on me, stop by with groceries, and ask about my health. I thought grief had reminded him of the importance of family. I was wrong. I now recognize that these visits were reconnaissance missions. Thomas would casually walk through the house, commenting on loose handrails or uneven steps. He would ask if I had trouble navigating the stairs to the basement or reaching items in high cabinets. He would point out potential hazards like area rugs or extension cords. All of this was framed as concern for my safety, but it was actually building a case for why I should not live independently. 6 months after Evelyn's death, Thomas and Amanda invited me to Sunday dinner at their home. The grandchildren were sent to a movie with friends, which should have been my first clue that this was not a typical family gathering. Over roast beef and expensive wine, they first brought up what they called aging-in-place challenges. "Dad," Thomas said, refilling my wine glass for the 3rd time, "Amanda and I have been talking about your situation. That house is really too big for one person, especially with all those stairs and the slippery deck." Amanda nodded sympathetically. My grandmother insisted on staying in her home too long. She had a terrible fall and spent her last years in a nursing home. We would hate to see that happen to you. I assured them I was fine, that the house was in good condition, and I was perfectly capable of maintaining it. They exchanged a look I could not interpret at the time but now recognize as frustration that I was not taking their bait. Over the next few weeks, I noticed articles about elder falls appearing around my house. A magazine left open to a story about hip fractures in the bathroom. A newspaper with a highlighted article about the dangers of living alone after 70. A printout about retirement communities placed conspicuously on my desk. When I confronted Thomas, he claimed he was just trying to help me prepare for the future. During one of their visits, I overheard Thomas on the phone in my backyard. "The location is prime waterfront," he said. 2 acres with 300 feet of beach frontage. The house would need to be torn down, but a developer could easily put 3 luxury homes on the lot and make a killing. My heart sank as I realized he was discussing my property, my home, as if it were already his to sell. I quietly moved away before he could see me, trying to process this betrayal. That night, I went through my office and discovered that several financial documents were out of place. My property tax statement, insurance policy, and the most recent appraisal were all slightly askew in their folders. Someone had been looking at them. Still, I was reluctant to believe my own son would actually betray me so completely. I made excuses for his behavior. He was concerned about my future. He wanted to make sure I was financially secure. He was still grieving his mother and worried about losing me too. I wanted to believe the best about my only child, but the evidence continued to mount. Thomas began taking photos of the house during his visits, claiming they were for insurance purposes, in case something happened to me. Amanda offered to organize my financial documents, creating a spreadsheet of my assets that they conveniently kept a copy of. They scheduled a medical checkup for me without my knowledge, telling the doctor I had been experiencing memory issues. The more I resisted their suggestions that I should move to a more appropriate living situation, the more concerned they claimed to be about my mental state. They began using phrases like, "Dad seems confused today," or "He forgot we talked about this last week," when speaking about me as if I was not in the room. They were building a narrative of an elderly man in cognitive decline, and I felt powerless to stop it. One Saturday morning, Thomas and Amanda arrived unannounced with a woman they introduced as Diane, a friend who happened to be in the neighborhood. It took less than 5 minutes of conversation to realize Diane was a realtor. She walked through my home with a practiced eye, commenting on the great bones and potential for updating. She measured rooms while Thomas distracted me with questions about my medication. I watched from the kitchen as Diane whispered to Amanda in the living room. "Even with the dated finishes, the location alone makes it worth over $2 million. With some updates, you could easily ask 2.8. Later that week, I returned from my volunteer work to find several pieces of my furniture had been replaced. The antique armchair that had belonged to my father was gone, replaced by a generic recliner with a lifting mechanism. The coffee table Evelyn and I had bought on our 20th anniversary trip to Vermont had vanished, replaced by a round table with a padded edge. Thomas had left a note. "Dad, we upgraded some furniture to safer options. The old pieces are in storage." I called him immediately. "Thomas, you had no right to remove my furniture without asking me." "Dad, that old chair was a hazard. The arms were loose, and it sat too low. You were struggling to get out of it, and that coffee table had sharp corners. One fall could be catastrophic at your age. At my age, I am 68, not 98. I have never fallen in this house, and I am perfectly capable of deciding what furniture I want." Thomas's voice took on the patronizing tone I was beginning to hate. "You are not thinking clearly about the risks. Amanda and I are just looking out for your best interests." The next confrontation came when I discovered my mail had been redirected to Thomas's address. I received a call from my credit card company about a missed payment and learned they had been sending statements to Thomas for 2 months. When I called the post office, they confirmed the change of address had been submitted online using my information. I drove to Thomas's house that evening, angrier than I had been in years. "Why did you change my mailing address without telling me?" Thomas looked surprised to see me. "Dad, What are you doing driving after dark? Your night vision is not what it used to be. Answer my question. Why are you intercepting my mail? Amanda appeared behind him, her face a mask of concern. Lyle, you asked us to help with your bills after you missed several payments. Do you not remember that conversation? We were worried about your utilities getting shut off. That never happened. I have never missed a payment in my life. Thomas exchanged a glance with Amanda. Dad, this is exactly what concerns us. You are having memory issues. You specifically asked us to handle your finances during Sunday dinner last month. I knew with absolute certainty that conversation never occurred, but they were so convincing that for a moment I questioned my own memory. This, I later learned, is called gaslighting, a manipulation technique designed to make the victim doubt their own perceptions. The situation escalated during a family dinner at my house. I had prepared Evelyn's famous lasagna recipe and was looking forward to a pleasant evening with my grandchildren. As we ate, Amanda casually mentioned fair market value and capital gains exemptions to Thomas. When I asked what they were discussing, they quickly changed the subject. After dinner, while looking for a book to show Jackson, I found assisted living brochures hidden in my desk drawer. Luxury retirement communities, all within 30 minutes of Thomas and Amanda's home, with notes in Amanda's handwriting about costs and availability. They had been researching places to move me without my knowledge or consent. I confronted them after the children went outside. I found the brochures. Were you going to consult me at any point about my own living arrangements? Thomas's face hardened. Dad, we have tried to have this conversation multiple times, but you refuse to be realistic. This house is too much for you. You need a place with staff and other seniors for socialization. I am perfectly happy here. I have friends, my volunteer work, and memories of your mother everywhere. That is just it, Amanda interjected. You are living in the past. It is not healthy, and frankly, it is selfish. Selfish? How is living in my own home selfish? Thomas exploded. Because you are sitting on nearly $3 million in real estate that could be used for your grandchildren's education, for investments that would benefit the whole family. Instead, you are being stubborn and unable to accept reality. There it was, the truth behind their concern. They did not care about my safety or happiness. They wanted the value of my home. The confrontation ended with Thomas's first veiled threat. Dad, we might need to have you evaluated if you keep refusing help, for your own good. The following week, I called my longtime doctor, Bernard Weiss, to discuss some mild arthritis pain. At the end of our appointment, he asked, Lyle, is everything okay at home? Your son has called several times expressing concerns about your cognitive function. I was stunned. What exactly did he say? Dr. Weiss looked uncomfortable. He mentioned memory lapses, confusion about medications, poor judgment regarding safety. He asked if I had observed any signs of dementia during your appointments. And have you? Absolutely not. You are one of my sharpest patients, Lyle. I told him as much, but he seemed determined to find problems. That evening, I went through my home office carefully and discovered that several important documents were missing. My will, power of attorney forms, and the deed to my house. I had last seen them in my filing cabinet after Evelyn died when I updated my will to make Thomas the sole beneficiary. Now they were gone. The final straw came when Thomas and Amanda showed up at my door with a stranger who introduced himself as Dr. Lawrence, a geriatric specialist. They had scheduled an in-home evaluation without telling me. This is absurd, I said, blocking the doorway. I am not being examined in my own home without my consent. Dad, we are worried about you, Thomas insisted. Just let Dr. Lawrence ask you a few questions. It is routine for someone your age. Someone my age? I volunteer 3 days a week, maintain my own home, and have a more active social life than you do. There is nothing wrong with me, except a son who seems determined to declare me incompetent. Dr. Lawrence looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should reschedule when Mr. Thompson is more receptive. After they left, I sat on my deck, watching the sunset over the water, tears streaming down my face. The painful realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. My son saw me as an obstacle to wealth, not as a father to be loved and respected. The son I had raised, educated, and supported throughout his life was now plotting to take everything from me because he could not wait for his inheritance. That night, I looked at Evelyn's photograph beside our bed. "What would you do?" I whispered to her image. She had always been the stronger one, the one who saw people clearly and set firm boundaries when needed. I knew what she would say. "Fight for our home, Lyle. Fight for your dignity." 2 weeks later, Thomas and Amanda arrived at my door on a Sunday afternoon. Thomas was carrying a leather portfolio, and Amanda had several cardboard boxes. Their expressions were determined as they walked into my living room without waiting for an invitation. "Dad, we need to talk," Thomas said, placing the portfolio on the coffee table. "This situation cannot continue." "What situation would that be?" I asked, though I already knew. Amanda arranged the boxes near the staircase. "Lyle, we have given you ample time to come to terms with your limitations, but you continue to resist reasonable solutions. It is time for more direct intervention." Thomas sat across from me, his face a mask of false concern. "We are moving in tomorrow, Dad. It has been decided." The bluntness of his statement took my breath away. "Decided by whom, exactly?" "By those who have your best interests at heart," Amanda replied, opening the portfolio. "We have prepared some simple paperwork that will make this transition easier for everyone." She spread several documents on the table. I recognized a deed transfer form, power of attorney documents, and medical authorization papers. My hands began to tremble, not from age or fear, but from suppressed rage. "These documents transfer the house to Thomas and me," Amanda explained in her lawyerly tone. "In exchange, we will provide lifetime care for you. It is a simple arrangement that many families make." "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Thomas leaned forward. "Dad, this is not a negotiation. Either you sign these papers voluntarily, or we will be forced to petition the court for guardianship. Amanda has connections with several judges who handle these matters. They tend to favor family members who can provide appropriate care over elderly individuals living alone." I picked up one of the documents, pretending to read it while I processed this threat. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered something alarming: falsified medical assessments, suggesting I was experiencing significant cognitive decline. One report, purportedly from Dr. Weiss, claimed I had shown signs of early dementia and poor judgment regarding safety. Another, from Dr. Lawrence, whom I had refused to see, somehow contained a detailed evaluation, concluding I should not live independently. "These medical reports are fabricated," I said, my voice steady despite my shock. "I spoke to Dr. Weiss last week. He has observed no cognitive issues whatsoever." Thomas waved his hand dismissively. "Dad, this is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking we are concerned about. Why would we falsify medical records?" "To steal my home," I replied simply. Amanda's professional demeanor slipped for a moment, revealing irritation. "That is an offensive accusation, Lyle. We are trying to ensure your safety and proper care." "Really? Then why have you been telling my neighbors I am mentally unstable?" Thomas had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "We have simply expressed our concerns to Jack and Martha about some behaviors we have observed. They agreed you have seemed different since Mom died." This was another lie. Jack and Martha had said nothing of the sort to me, and we spoke almost daily. Amanda continued with her presentation, revealing their detailed plan. I would sign over the house immediately, and they would move in the next day. Initially, I would stay in my bedroom, while they took the master suite. Eventually, once they had assessed my needs, they would transition me to what Amanda called a nice facility where I could socialize with peers while they began renovations on the house. "The market for luxury waterfront homes is incredibly strong right now," she explained, as if selling me on the idea. "With some updates and modernization, This property could easily sell for over 3 million. So your plan is to move me to a facility, renovate my home, and then sell it? I asked, wanting to hear them say it explicitly. Thomas looked me directly in the eyes. Dad, this house is wasted on one person. The proceeds from the sale could benefit the entire family. Jackson and Sophia's college funds, investments for retirement, perhaps even a vacation property we could all enjoy. All except me, since I would be in a facility. You would be taken care of, Amanda insisted. We would make sure your needs were met. The most crushing moment came when Thomas added, Mom would want you to be taken care of. She would understand this is for the best. Invoking Evelyn, using her memory to manipulate me, was unforgivable. She would have been horrified by their behavior. She would have thrown them out of our home without a moment's hesitation. But I was not ready to show my hand. Not yet. I need time to think about this, I said, allowing my voice to quaver slightly. Just until tomorrow. I want to review these papers on my own. Thomas and Amanda exchanged triumphant glances, believing they had won. Their smug satisfaction was almost unbearable. Of course, Dad. Take tonight to process everything. We will be back tomorrow at 9 with the moving truck. Just have your bedroom cleared out so we can move our things in. After they left, I sat alone in the growing darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. I held Evelyn's photograph in my hands and allowed myself to cry, truly cry, for the first time since their betrayal had begun. I cried for the son I thought I had raised, for the relationship I had lost, for the future that would now be irrevocably changed. But as the tears subsided, something else took their place. Determination. A quiet voice that sounded remarkably like Evelyn's whispered in my mind. You built this house with your hands and your heart. Do not let them take it from you. I wiped my eyes and stood up straight. Evelyn would want me to fight, I said aloud to the empty room, and fight I would. The minute Thomas and Amanda's car disappeared down my driveway, I picked up the phone and called Richard Donovan, my oldest friend and a retired attorney. Richard and I had met in college 50 years ago and had remained close ever since. He had been Evelyn's and my attorney until his retirement 5 years ago, and he knew our family well. Richard, I said when he answered, I need your help urgently. Can you come over tonight? His response was immediate. I will be there in 30 minutes. While waiting for Richard, I gathered all the evidence I had collected over the past months. Notes of conversations, dates of suspicious incidents, and the falsified medical reports Thomas and Amanda had left behind. I also found recent photographs of myself, engaged in activities that demonstrated my capabilities, including teaching at the community center and building a kayak in my workshop. Richard arrived carrying a legal briefcase, his expression concerned. What is going on, Lyle? Over the next 2 hours, I explained everything. Thomas and Amanda's escalating manipulation, their attempts to gaslight me, the falsified medical reports, and finally, their ultimatum. Richard listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, his face was grim. This is elder abuse, plain and simple, and their threat to declare you incompetent without valid medical evidence is both unethical and potentially illegal. Amanda should know better as an attorney. She could face bar discipline for this. What can I do? I asked. They are coming tomorrow with moving trucks. Richard's expression hardened. We fight back, methodically and legally. First thing tomorrow, we get you comprehensive cognitive and health evaluations from independent doctors. Thomas has connections at most of the major hospitals, I pointed out. I know a neurologist in Bellevue who specializes in cognitive assessment. She has no connection to Thomas or his practice. We will get you documented as completely competent. For the next several hours, Richard and I developed a detailed counterplan. First, I needed to secure all my remaining important documents. The next morning, Richard would accompany me to open a safe deposit box at a bank where Thomas did not have accounts. Next, Richard said, we need to document your current capabilities. Video of you engaged in complex tasks testimony from your students and colleagues at the community center, statements from neighbors other than Jack and Martha, since Thomas has already tried to influence them. Jack and Martha would never betray me, I said confidently. They have known me for 25 years. Even so, we need independent verification. We will build a comprehensive portfolio demonstrating your competence. The most important part of our plan, however, was finding a solution for the house itself. I loved my home, but I recognized that staying there after Thomas's betrayal would be difficult. Each room held memories of both Evelyn and the son I thought I had raised. Perhaps it was time for a fresh start. What if I sell the house myself? I suggested. Before they can force me out? Richard considered this. It would certainly undermine their plan. But real estate transactions take time. We would need to move quickly and find a buyer willing to close fast. I know someone who might help, I said, thinking of Sharon Davis, a real estate agent who had helped several of my community center colleagues sell their homes. She was known for her integrity and efficiency. The next morning, while Thomas was at his medical practice and Amanda was in court, I met with Sharon at a cafe across town. I explained my situation without going into too much detail, simply saying that I needed to sell my home quickly and discreetly. Sharon was professional and compassionate. Waterfront properties in your area are in high demand, Mr. Thompson. With your permission, I could show it to a few select clients who I know are looking for exactly this kind of property and who have the means to make a quick, cash offer. Over the next 3 days, while pretending to consider Thomas and Amanda's ultimatum, I secretly showed my house to potential buyers. Sharon brought only serious candidates who had been pre-qualified for large purchases. On the second day, she introduced me to David and Elizabeth Anderson, a lovely couple in their 50s. David had recently sold his technology company for a substantial sum, and they were looking for a waterfront property to enjoy in semi-retirement. Your home is exactly what we have been searching for, Elizabeth told me, as she admired the view from my deck. The architecture is timeless, and the location is incomparable. They offered the full asking price of $2.8 million with a 7-day closing period, contingent only on a satisfactory home inspection. I accepted immediately. With the house sale in process, I turned my attention to finding a new home for myself. I wanted something smaller but still comfortable. Ideally a single-story house in a friendly community where I could maintain my independence. Sharon helped me locate a beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in a nearby town, close enough to maintain my volunteer work, but far enough that I would not regularly cross paths with Thomas and Amanda. Using my savings, I put a deposit on the bungalow, which was priced reasonably at $600,000. The timing would work perfectly. I could use the proceeds from my house sale to purchase the bungalow outright, with plenty left over for future security. Meanwhile, Richard had arranged for me to be evaluated by Dr. Eleanor Chen, a respected neurologist specializing in cognitive function in older adults. After a comprehensive 3-hour assessment, she provided a detailed report confirming that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. In fact, she noted that my cognitive function was exceptional for a person of any age. Richard also introduced me to Frank Winters, an attorney specializing in elder law. Frank helped me open new accounts at a credit union across town and advised me on protecting my assets from potential legal challenges from Thomas. Based on what you have told me, Frank said, they have been building a fraudulent case against you. The falsified medical reports alone constitute a serious ethical breach, possibly criminal. To further protect myself, I began legally recording conversations whenever Thomas or Amanda called or visited. Washington is a single-party consent state, meaning only one person in the conversation needs to consent to recording, and that person can be the one doing the recording. I installed a simple app on my phone that Richard recommended and documented every interaction. I also recruited several friends from my community center to help me move my most precious possessions: photographs of Evelyn, family heirlooms, my collection of architectural books, and the furniture I had built myself. They stored these items in their garages and spare rooms, ready to move them to my new home once the purchase was complete. Jack and Martha Once they understood what Thomas and Amanda were planning, were outraged and immediately offered to provide statements about my competence and capabilities. "We see you every day, Lyle," Martha said. "Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you knows you are sharp as a tack and perfectly able to manage your own affairs." With each passing day, my confidence grew. I was no longer a victim, waiting to be displaced from my own home. I was taking control of the situation, making my own decisions, and protecting myself from those who sought to exploit me. For the first time since Thomas's betrayal began, I slept soundly, knowing I had a solid plan. The day before, Thomas and Amanda planned to move in. All the pieces were in place. The Andersons' home inspection had been completed with flying colors. The sale contract was ready for final signatures, and my new home was being prepared for my arrival. Richard, Sharon, Frank, and my community center friends were all standing by, ready to play their parts in the confrontation to come. That night, I walked through each room of the house I had designed and built, saying goodbye to the space that had sheltered my family for 30 years. There was sadness, certainly, but also a sense of rightness. This house had served its purpose. It had been the setting for a beautiful marriage, for raising a son, for countless memories. Now it would provide me with the financial security to begin a new chapter, one where I would surround myself with people who truly cared about my well-being. "We had a good life here," I whispered to Evelyn's spirit as I stood in our bedroom one last time. "But it is time for me to go." Somehow, I felt her approval surrounding me like a warm embrace. I was ready to face Thomas and Amanda. I was ready to show them that I was not the feeble, confused old man they believed me to be. I was Lyle Thompson, architect, father, widower, and a man fully capable of defending himself against those who would take advantage of him. At precisely 8:30 the next morning, I was sitting in my living room drinking coffee when I heard vehicles pulling into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Thomas's Mercedes, followed by a large moving truck. Amanda's BMW arrived moments later. They had come prepared to take over my home, just as they had threatened. I took a deep breath and sent a text message to Richard. "They are here. Plan in motion." Thomas did not bother to knock. He used the key I had given him for emergencies and walked in with Amanda close behind. Both looked surprised to see me dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, calmly sipping coffee in the living room. "Dad, you are up early," Thomas commented, scanning the room for signs that I had packed. "I have been up for hours," I replied pleasantly. "It is an important day, after all." Amanda set her designer handbag on the counter. "Have you had a chance to review the documents, Lyle? We brought the originals for you to sign." "Actually, we are waiting for a few people to join us before discussing any paperwork," I said. Thomas frowned. "What people?" "Dad, this is a private family matter." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. "That must be them now," I said, rising to answer it. I opened the door to Sharon Davis and the Andersons, all smiling warmly. "Please come in," I said, ushering them into the living room. "Thomas, Amanda, I would like you to meet Sharon Davis, my real estate agent, and David and Elizabeth Anderson, the buyers of this house." The confusion on Thomas and Amanda's faces would have been comical under other circumstances. "Buyers?" Thomas sputtered. "What are you talking about?" Sharon stepped forward professionally. "Mr. Thompson has accepted the Andersons' offer of $2.8 million for this property. We are here to complete the final paperwork for the sale." Amanda's legal training kicked in immediately. "That is impossible. My father-in-law is not competent to enter into such a contract. Any sale would be invalid." The doorbell rang again, and I excused myself to answer it. Richard stood there with Dr. Chen and Frank Winters. "Perfect timing," I said, leading them into the increasingly crowded living room. "Thomas, Amanda, this is Richard Donovan, my attorney, Dr. Eleanor Chen, who has conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation of me, and Frank Winters, who specializes in elder law." Richard took control of the situation with the authority of a man who had spent 40 years in courtrooms. I believe you have been operating under a misconception regarding Lyle's cognitive status. Dr. Chen, would you please summarize your findings? Dr. Chen opened her briefcase and removed a thick file. I conducted a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation of Mr. Thompson 3 days ago. He shows no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. In fact, his scores on tests of executive function, memory, and problem-solving are well above average for his age group. Thomas's face flushed red. This is absurd. We have reports from multiple doctors indicating significant concerns about Dad's judgment and memory. Falsified reports. I corrected him. I have spoken directly with Dr. Weiss, who denies ever writing the assessment you included in your paperwork. And Dr. Lawrence never actually examined me, despite what his report claims. Amanda stepped forward, her lawyer persona taking over. This is a family matter that has been taken out of context. Thomas and I are simply concerned about Lyle's well-being. Is that why you told the Harrises down the street that I was suffering from dementia? I asked calmly. Or why you redirected my mail without my permission? I continued. Or why you removed furniture from my home while I was out? Or why you scheduled medical appointments without my knowledge? We were trying to help, Thomas insisted, his voice rising, by moving into my house against my wishes and planning to send me to a facility so you could renovate and sell it. I pulled out my phone. Would you like to hear the recording of our conversation, where you explained that plan in detail? Amanda blanched. Recording conversations without consent is illegal. Frank Winters spoke up. Not in Washington State, Counselor. As I'm sure you are aware, this is a single-party consent state. Mr. Thompson was well within his rights to record conversations to which he was a party. The moving truck driver knocked on the open door. Where do you want us to start unloading? There will be no unloading today, Sharon informed him. There has been a misunderstanding. David Anderson, who had been quietly observing, spoke for the first time. Mr. Thompson, Elizabeth and I are still very interested in purchasing your home if these complications don't change your mind about selling. They do not, I assured him. The sale will proceed as planned. Thomas stepped toward me, desperation in his eyes. Dad, you cannot do this. Where will you live? You need our help. I have purchased a lovely bungalow in Edmonds, I informed him. Single story, in a friendly neighborhood, close to my volunteer work. I move in next week. With what money? Amanda demanded. My savings, I replied simply. Contrary to what you seem to believe, I am financially secure. The confrontation reached its climax when Thomas, realizing his plans were collapsing, lost his composure completely. This is our family home. You have no right to sell it out from under us. We are your family, your future. Those assets should be preserved for your grandchildren. His outburst revealed his true intentions more clearly than anything else could have. The Andersons looked shocked, and Sharon moved protectively closer to me. Amanda tried damage control. What Thomas means is that we all assumed the family home would stay in the family. It is an emotional subject. I am sure it is, Richard replied dryly, especially when $3 million is at stake. Frank Winters laid out several documents on the coffee table. Mr. Thompson has prepared new estate planning documents that I have reviewed and certified. He has also filed reports with Adult Protective Services regarding the attempted financial exploitation he has experienced. At the mention of Adult Protective Services, Amanda's professional demeanor cracked. That is outrageous. We were trying to protect him. From what, exactly? Dr. Chen asked. He is in excellent health, cognitively sharp, and fully capable of independent living and financial decision-making. The doorbell rang again, and Jack and Martha entered, followed by 5 of my students from the community center. They had come to help me move the last of my personal belongings to temporary storage until my new home was ready. Lyle, we brought the truck like you asked, Jack said, pointedly ignoring Thomas and Amanda. The guys are ready to move whatever you need. Thomas and Amanda watched in disbelief as my support system mobilized around me. These were people who knew me, who saw me regularly, who could testify to my capabilities and independence. Their presence made it impossible to maintain the fiction that I was a confused old man in need of intervention. As Sharon began reviewing the sale documents with the Andersons, Thomas made one last desperate attempt. "Dad, please, where will we get that kind of money now? We have the children's tuition, the country club dues, the mortgage." I looked at my son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw not the little boy I had raised, or the doctor he had become, but a man who had lost his way, who had allowed greed and materialism to override basic decency and family loyalty. "That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem," I replied, using one of my students' favorite phrases. "Perhaps it is time to reassess your priorities." The sale documents were signed that morning. The Andersons would take possession in 1 week, giving me time to complete my move. Thomas and Amanda left without saying goodbye, Amanda practically dragging Thomas to the car as he continued to protest. As I watched them drive away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, anger at their betrayal, but predominantly an overwhelming sense of relief and dignity. I had walked away from my home on my own terms. I had protected myself from exploitation. I had stood up for my rights and won. My friends surrounded me, offering congratulations and support. "You did it, Lyle," Martha said, squeezing my hand. "Evelyn would be so proud." I believe she would have been. Not because I had outsmarted Thomas and Amanda, but because I had refused to be a victim. I had faced a painful truth about my own child, and found the strength to act with integrity and self-respect. As the moving truck Thomas had brought pulled away empty, and my friends began carefully packing my remaining treasures, I stepped onto the deck one last time. The water sparkled in the sunshine, seagulls wheeled overhead, and a sense of peace settled over me. This chapter was ending, but a new one was about to begin. 1 month later, I was fully settled into my new bungalow in Edmonds. The house was perfect for me. A cozy 3-bedroom craftsman with a front porch, a small but manageable garden, and most importantly, no stairs. I had converted 1 bedroom into a home office, another into a guest room, and the third into a small workshop where I could continue my woodworking projects. The neighborhood welcomed me warmly. My next-door neighbors, the Wilsons, brought over a homemade apple pie the day I moved in. Across the street, the Patels invited me for dinner and introduced me to their 3 young children, who were fascinated by my architectural models. Within weeks, I had more dinner invitations than I could accept and had joined the local community garden. With a significant portion of the proceeds from selling my waterfront home, I established the Evelyn Thompson Memorial Scholarship for architecture students at the University of Washington. The scholarship would provide full tuition for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds, allowing Evelyn's generous spirit to continue making a difference. Setting up the endowment gave me immense satisfaction, knowing that her memory would live on in the achievements of talented young architects for generations to come. The distance from Thomas was painful but necessary. He called frequently in the weeks after our confrontation, alternating between anger, attempts at manipulation, and half-hearted apologies. Amanda sent formal legal letters demanding I reconsider my rash decisions and warning of the potential consequences of alienating family. I saved every message and email as evidence, following Frank's advice, but I did not engage with their attempts to regain control. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with my grandchildren. I reached out to Jackson and Sophia directly, inviting them to visit my new home on weekends. Initially, they were confused by the family tension, but children are remarkably adaptable. Once they understood they could still have a relationship with me, independent of their parents' actions, they began to relax and enjoy our time together. I took them to museums, taught them basic architectural principles, and encouraged their individual interests. Jackson, it turned out, had an aptitude for design that he had never mentioned at home, fearing his parents would not approve of such an impractical hobby. Sophia loved cooking and gardening, activities that Amanda had always outsourced to household staff. In my modest kitchen, Sophia learned to bake using Evelyn's recipes, creating a connection to the grandmother she barely remembered. My volunteer work at the community center expanded. I was asked to develop a full curriculum for the architecture program, which now included not only design principles, but also sustainable building practices and community planning. My students, ranging from 16 to 70, brought diverse perspectives and boundless enthusiasm to each class. Teaching them became the highlight of my week, a purpose that filled the void left by family estrangement. I deepened my friendships with Jack and Martha, who regularly drove from our old neighborhood to visit. They brought updates about the Andersons, who were lovingly maintaining the gardens Evelyn had planted while updating the house with sustainable materials and systems. Knowing the home was being cared for by people who appreciated its design and history brought me unexpected peace. At the community center, I met Gloria Reynolds, a retired high school English teacher who volunteered in the literacy program. At 65, Gloria had recently gone through her own family upheaval when her daughter and son-in-law had tried to pressure her into selling her home to fund their struggling business. Her experience so closely mirrored my own that we immediately formed a bond based on mutual understanding. Gloria and I began having coffee after our volunteer shifts, sharing stories and discussing books. Eventually, those coffee dates extended to dinners, museum visits, and long walks along the waterfront. Her intelligence, compassion, and quiet strength reminded me of Evelyn, though they were very different women. 6 months after meeting, we acknowledged that our friendship had blossomed into something deeper, something neither of us had expected to find at this stage of life. Throughout this period of rebuilding, I reflected deeply on the nature of family, betrayal, and setting healthy boundaries. The hardest lesson was accepting that sharing DNA does not guarantee love or loyalty. Thomas had made choices based on values I had apparently failed to instill in him. His actions reflected his character, not my worth as a father or a person. I also learned that vulnerability is not the same as weakness. Asking for help from friends, creating a support network, and acknowledging my own emotional pain required courage. The cultural narrative that men, especially of my generation, should handle problems alone had nearly cost me everything. By reaching out and accepting support, I had found strength I never knew I possessed. The freedom of living authentically, without fear of exploitation, transformed me. I began taking risks I would never have considered before, enrolling in a watercolor class despite no artistic talent whatsoever, joining a senior kayaking club despite not having been in a boat for decades, even trying salsa dancing at Gloria's encouragement. Some attempts were more successful than others. My watercolors remained questionable at best, but each represented a step toward a fuller, more authentic life. A year after the confrontation, Thomas reached out with what seemed like a more sincere attempt at reconciliation. "Dad, I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said during a phone call. "I handled everything badly. I was worried about your future, but I went about it all wrong." "Were you worried about my future, Thomas, or about your inheritance?" I asked calmly. His hesitation told me everything. It was complicated. We were under financial pressure, and the house seemed like a solution to so many problems. "The house was never yours to solve problems with," I pointed out. "It was my home, built with my hands for your mother and our family." "I know that now," he said, his voice subdued. "Amanda and I have separated. Her focus on appearances and status, it was destroying us. I could not see it until everything fell apart." This news surprised me. Thomas and Amanda had always presented such a united front. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I did not wish him unhappiness. "The thing is, Dad, I need some financial help until the practice stabilizes. The divorce, the kids' tuition, the mortgage," and there it was. Not an apology or genuine reconciliation, but another attempt to access my resources. The request saddened me, but also confirmed that I had made the right decision to protect myself. "Thomas, I forgive you for what happened," I said truthfully. Holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. But forgiveness does not mean removing boundaries or pretending nothing happened. I will always be your father, and I will always love you, but I cannot and will not provide financial support. His response was predictable. Anger, accusations, attempts to make me feel guilty. But this time, his words held no power over me. I had learned to distinguish between love and exploitation, between guilt and responsibility. I wished him well and ended the call, feeling sad but at peace with my decision. In the quiet of my new home that evening, I sat on my front porch watching the sunset, Gloria beside me reading a novel. My neighbors waved as they walked dogs or returned from work. My phone buzzed with texts from my grandchildren and a reminder about tomorrow's community center class. My life had been rebuilt, different but rich in meaning and connection. The greatest lesson from this chapter of my life was learning to value authentic relationships over material possessions or cultural expectations. The house I had designed and built had indeed been special, but in the end, it was just a structure. What mattered were the connections I had formed, the impact I had on my students, the love I shared with family members who chose to remain in my life, and the new bonds I continued to create. At 68, I had begun again, not despite my age, but because of it. With decades of experience behind me, I knew what truly mattered and had the wisdom to prioritize it. There was immense liberation in choosing my own path, in defining family by love rather than obligation, in building a life aligned with my values. If you are facing your own family challenges or feeling pressured to make decisions that do not feel right, remember that it is never too late to stand up for yourself. Age brings not just challenges, but also clarity and strength. Trust your instincts, build your support network, and know that your life remains your own, to shape at every stage. I would love to hear your stories in the comments. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from family pressure? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Please share your experiences. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and hit the like button if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening. And remember, the most important home we build is not made of wood and stone, but of the choices we make and the boundaries we set to protect our peace and dignity.